I've already booked it for 40 of my guests this weekend, she barked. All HOA assets are for community use, Michael. Her voice cut through the calm afternoon air, echoing across the glassy surface of Lakewood Estates. On the dock stood Sophia Brown, the sharp-tongued HOA president, her sunglasses flashing like warning lights. On the deck above, Michael Johnson, 48, a retired CFO turned lakeside homeowner, swirled a glass of whiskey, his expression unreadable. The yacht's Serenity gleamed behind him, 60 feet of luxury and peace, now under siege by HOA politics. Sophia, he said evenly, you don't book someone else's yacht. Oh, I can, she snapped. Refuse and you'll be fined daily. The HOA rules are law here. Michael smiled faintly. The lake was silent, except for the soft hum of the wind. He set his glass down and looked straight at her. Funny thing, Sophia, he said. That yacht, the dock, you're standing on the shoreline behind you? Even this marina. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. They all belong to me. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. And make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. When I moved to Lakewood Estates, I thought I'd finally found peace. After 25 years of mergers, balance sheets, and sleepless boardroom nights, I wanted quiet mornings with coffee by the water, afternoons tinkering with my yacht, and evenings where the loudest sound was the hum of crickets along the lake. I'd earned that peace, or so I thought. Lakewood Estates looked perfect on paper, a gated lakeside community 30 miles outside Denver, built around a man-made lake that stretched across 50 acres. Elegant homes wrapped around the shoreline, each with its own private dock. At the heart of it all sat the Lakewood Marina, a polished jewel of convenience, covered slips, refueling stations, a small cafe, and storage for 24 boats. My house overlooked that marina. I bought it 2 years after retiring from finance, back when I was still figuring out how to live without deadlines. I'd saved for my yacht Serenity, a 60-foot marvel of engineering, for nearly a decade. It wasn't just a luxury. It was the symbol of everything I had built and everything I'd escaped from. But Lakewood Estates had its own currency, not in dollars, but in control. And no one embodied that better than Sophia Brown. She'd been president of the HOA for 7 straight years, which told me 2 things. 1, no one had the energy to challenge her, and 2, she liked power more than most people liked breathing. Sophia was 52, sharp as a tack and twice as poisonous when crossed. Her home sat at the lake's prime curve, white columns imported rose garden security cameras on every corner. The first time I met her, she was wearing a pink blazer and pearls before 9 a.m., clipboard in hand. She didn't say hello. She said, "You're parked 3 inches too close to the curb." That was the welcome committee. Over time, I learned how Sophia operated. The HOA board wasn't a team. It was her personal army, a group of wealthy retirees. She called her inner circle. 5 of them, all women, all more loyal to Sophia than they were to common sense. They didn't just enforce rules, they created them. A new paint color, Sophia had to approve it. Lawn too long, expect a notice. American flag too big, fine incoming. It didn't take long before I realized that community harmony in Lakewood Estates really meant do what Sophia says. At first I stayed out of it. I paid my dues, nodded at the neighbors, and kept to myself. That suited me fine. I was used to spreadsheets, not social politics. I didn't even attend the HOA meetings. I figured as long as I didn't make noise, I'd be left alone. And for a while I was. Sophia's inner circle focused their energy elsewhere, bickering about lawn flamingos, power washing schedules, and which Christmas lights were aesthetically inconsistent. I enjoyed the quiet and spent my time on the water, learning every inch of the lake. That's when I discovered something strange. The marina, which everyone assumed was HOA property, wasn't registered under Lakewood Estates at all. I found out after reviewing my deed during a renovation. The marina, the docks, shoreline, and fueling station were all still under the original developers corporation, listed as Lakewood Development Holdings. Out of curiosity, I called the county office and confirmed it. When I reached out to the developer, I learned they'd planned to sell the marina to the HOA years earlier, but Sophia never followed through because the board didn't have the budget. They used it under a token lease instead. So when the developer offered to sell the marina to me privately with full ownership of the docks and shoreline, I didn't hesitate. It was an investment, and I liked the idea of controlling what touched my property. The deal went through quietly. No one in the HOA knew, and I didn't see a reason to announce it. For nearly 2 years, things stayed calm. The lake sparkled, neighbors waved, and the HOA drama stayed confined to the community Facebook page. I even started to think maybe Sophia had mellowed out until the day she noticed my yacht. I still remember her face that morning. I was down by the dock polishing the chrome railings on Serenity when I heard the sound of heels clicking behind me. There she was, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "That's new," she said. "Sure is," I replied. Her gaze swept the yacht like she was inspecting contraband. "It's impressive," she said finally. "Very community-spirited of you." I frowned. "Community-spirited? Well, of course," she said, smiling, that tight, condescending smile. "Boats docked in the Lakewood Marina are shared assets of the HOA. You'll be hosting lake tours soon, I assume," I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. A week later, I found out she'd added a new line in the HOA newsletter. Residents are encouraged to participate in the Marina Sharing Program to promote unity and equitable use of our shared lakefront amenities. I nearly spit out my coffee, reading it. Shared amenities, my marina, my yacht. Still, I didn't confront her, not yet. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, I told myself. Maybe she just didn't know about the ownership paperwork. That hope died quickly. One evening, I came home to find a note taped to my door. "Michael, please submit your yacht's availability schedule to the HOA portal before Friday. We've already had 6 families request reservations. Sophia Brown reservations. For my yacht." I walked down to the lake to cool off. The sun was setting, streaking the water gold, but all I could think about was how absurd this was. Sophia had clearly crossed from nosy to delusional. I decided to handle it the civil way. I called her. "Good evening, Sophia," I said. "Got your note. You might want to double-check your facts. Serenity is private property." She didn't hesitate. "All marina property falls under HOA oversight, Michael. You agreed to that when you bought in." "I didn't," I said. "Check the deed." "I will," she said sharply. "But in the meantime, submit your schedule. We'll avoid unnecessary fines that way." That was the first time she threatened me softly through that polished HOA-approved tone. I hung up and called my attorney Daniel Pierce, who specialized in real estate law. He laughed when I told him. "She's bluffing. There's no bylaw in the world that lets them commandeer your yacht. Just ignore it." But ignoring Sophia Brown was like ignoring termites. You don't see the damage until it's too late. Within a week, she'd turned the neighborhood against me. Emails started circulating whispers about how I refused to share community assets. One neighbor, a guy named Jeff who owned a jet ski, stopped waving when I passed. Another told me, "Sophia says you're trying to privatize the lake." Privatize the lake. It was almost impressive how quickly she twisted the narrative. Then came the HOA meeting. My first and unfortunately not my last. The clubhouse was packed. Sophia stood at the front, flanked by her inner circle, smiling like a queen, addressing her court. "Tonight," she said sweetly, "we'll vote on a new initiative to strengthen community spirit, the Marina Sharing Program." She made it sound noble, inclusive. She even showed slides photos of happy families on boats that weren't hers. I raised my hand. "Sophia," I said, "the marina is privately owned. The HOA doesn't have jurisdiction." She smiled like a shark. "Then you'll have no problem sharing voluntarily." The motion passed 67 to 33. When I got home that night, I found an official notice in my inbox. Effective immediately, all marina vessels must be registered in the HOA system. Members may reserve unused vessels with prior notice. Failure to comply may result in disciplinary action. I printed it, folded it neatly, and placed it in an envelope. Then I drafted my reply firm, legal and final. To the Lakewood Estates HOA Board, your marina sharing program is illegal and unenforceable. The marina docks and vessels therein are private property under my ownership, as documented in county records. Any attempt to access them without permission will constitute trespassing. Michael Johnson. I sealed it, dropped it in the HOA mailbox, and thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The following morning, I woke to the familiar ding of my phone. Another HOA email. The subject line read, "Notice of Noncompliance. Urgent response required." Sophia wasted no time. Less than 12 hours after my letter, she had already filed an official complaint accusing me of obstructing community access to shared resources. There it was in black and white, her attempt to turn private ownership into public property through sheer arrogance and paperwork. I brewed a pot of coffee, sat on the porch, and watched the lake shimmer in the early light. Serenity floated peacefully at the dock, the only quiet thing left in Lakewood Estates. I'd dealt with corporate bullies before, but Sophia Brown was something else entirely. She didn't just want control, she wanted submission. By noon, the neighborhood group chat was on fire. Someone leaked my refusal email, and now every armchair lawyer in the community had an opinion. "Why can't he just share it?" one wrote. "It's for the good of the community," another added. A third chimed in. If he lives in Lakewood, he agreed to HOA rules. Simple. The funny thing about mobs, they never check the facts, they just follow the loudest voice. And Sophia had the loudest voice in 3 counties. 2 days later, I received a printed notice taped to my front door. Lakewood HOA fine notice failure. To comply with community sharing guidelines, will incur a $500 daily fine beginning immediately. Sophia Brown, HOA president. I took the paper off my door and folded it neatly. Then I smiled the kind of smile I used to wear in board meetings right before closing a deal that no one saw coming. That night I called my lawyer Daniel Pierce. She's threatening daily fines, I said. He chuckled. Let her. None of this will hold up in court. HOA bylaws can't override state property law. Still, I said she's not backing down. Then we won't either, he said simply. The next few weeks turned into psychological warfare. Sophia began her campaign of intimidation, subtle at first, then shameless. HOA volunteers started driving by my property more often, taking photos for documentation. I got emails at 2 a.m. with subject lines like community harmony reminder and failure to participate in shared amenities. It was relentless. Then came the turning point. One Saturday morning I was fixing a railing on the dock when I heard voices, loud, female, and familiar. I turned around to see Sophia and her inner circle marching down the marina walkway, clipboards in hand, matching visors gleaming like armor. Michael, she said sweetly, we're conducting a marina inspection. Inspection of what? I asked. You don't own this place. She smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird. We'll see about that. HOA law grants us full oversight of community assets. Your dock is within the HOA boundary, therefore I cut her off, therefore nothing. This dock is on private land. You're trespassing. Her expression hardened. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Oh, I think you're the one making it hard, Sophia, I said, crossing my arms. You want to walk on this dock again. Bring a lawyer. The silence between us could have cracked glass. Finally, she turned on her heel, muttering something about selfish men and their toys. I thought that would be the end of it. But Sophia didn't retreat, she regrouped. A week later, I was sitting in the HOA clubhouse for what would become the most absurd meeting of my life. The room was packed, residents whispering, fans humming, tension thick enough to chew. Sophia stood at the front like a queen, addressing her subjects, a projector behind her, displaying the words, Marina Sharing Initiative, Community Vote. She began her speech with the same syrupy tone she always used when she was about to manipulate someone. Friends, neighbors, she said, spreading her hands. Lakewood Estates was built on the spirit of unity, but lately some individuals seem to believe they're above that spirit. They think their wealth entitles them to hoard what should belong to all of us. Her gaze swept the room and landed right on me. I leaned back in my chair, calm but seething. She clicked to the next slide. Photos of Serenity, my yacht, appeared on the screen, taken from every angle. This vessel represents what our community could be shared, accessible, bringing us together. Someone clapped. Someone else nodded. I clenched my jaw. She continued, with this initiative, HOA members can reserve unused marina vessels for personal recreation. No one loses, we all gain, the audience murmured in agreement. It was theater, and I was the villain she needed. When she opened the floor for comments, I stood up. Sophia, I said evenly, you're proposing to let people use private property without permission. That's not sharing, that's theft. Gasps, whispers. The inner circle scribbled notes like courtroom stenographers. Sophia smiled sweetly. Michael, we're just ensuring fair access. You chose to live here. You agreed to community oversight. I lifted a folder. Actually, I said I own the marina. Every inch of it. Purchased legally from the original developer 2 years ago. A wave of confusion rippled through the room. But Sophia recovered fast. That's not possible. HOA bylaws state all common areas revert to the association upon completion. Not this one, I replied. You never filed the transfer. County records are public. Feel free to check them. Her smile faltered for the first time that evening. But the damage was done. Her charisma had already infected the room. When the vote came, the result was almost predetermined. 67 inches favor 33 against. Motion passed. Sophia banged her gavel. Effective immediately, she said triumphantly, the Marina Sharing Initiative is approved. All residents must register their vessels for scheduling. I didn't argue further. I just gathered my papers, stood up, and said one sentence before walking out. You're about to make the biggest mistake of your HOA career. That night, I drafted another letter, this time far less polite. It included citations from state property code, trespassing laws, and liability insurance clauses. I sent it to the HOA board, copying Sophia personally. The next morning, my inbox exploded. She'd forwarded my letter to the entire community with a single line. Neighbors, please note Michael Johnson's refusal to cooperate with HOA policy. Such selfishness threatens our shared harmony. Within hours, the gossip mill went into overdrive. I became the rich snob, the problem neighbor, the guy who thinks he owns the lake. Ironically, they weren't wrong about the last part. 3 days later, a uniformed courier knocked on my door and handed me a thick envelope, another HOA notice. Effective immediately, the HOA board will monitor and enforce compliance with community sharing guidelines. Residents must provide vessel access calendars within 5 business days. They gave me a deadline. That evening, I went down to Serenity. The sun was setting behind the hills, turning the water gold. I stood there in the fading light thinking about my options. I could fight them publicly or I could wait. So I waited. For 2 weeks I didn't respond, didn't attend meetings, didn't engage, and that silence drove Sophia mad. She began sending inspection officers, HOA volunteers, with clipboards to photograph my dock. They hovered near the fence, snapping pictures, pretending not to stare. It would have been funny if it weren't so invasive. Finally, one Friday morning, I got a knock on the door. My neighbor Jim Harris stood there looking nervous. "Mike," he said, "just giving you a heads up, Sophia's planning something big for the weekend. Says it's a community celebration at the marina." I frowned. "At the marina," he nodded. "She sent invites. 40 guests. Music, barbecue, the works." For a long moment, I didn't move. I just stared past him toward the lake where the reflection of Serenity shimmered quietly, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Sophia Brown was coming for my yacht. And this time, she wasn't asking. Saturday morning began with laughter, not mine, of course. It came drifting across the lake like a swarm of flies. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's pool party. Then I heard music. Loud, obnoxious, bass-thumping music echoing off the water. I stepped onto my porch with my coffee in hand, and what I saw nearly made me spill it. Down at the marina, a crowd of about 40 people was setting up tables, folding chairs, and speakers. 2 men rolled out a grill the size of a car hood. A woman was hanging balloons on the railing of my dock, and in the center of it all, wearing her signature pink blazer and a smug smile, stood Sophia Brown. Clipboard in hand, megaphone slung over her shoulder, she looked like a dictator preparing for a parade. "Welcome everyone," she called out. "Today marks our first ever community yacht day. We'll start boarding at noon." I blinked. Did she just say boarding? Sure enough, 2 teenagers were struggling to remove the lock from Serenity's gate, guided by one of Sophia's inner circle members. That was it. I marched down the slope toward the marina. Gravel crunched under my boots as I approached the chaos. Several guests stopped mid-conversation when they saw me coming. "Michael, you made it," Sophia said brightly, as if this were a surprise party in my honor. "We're just getting things ready for the event. You'll be happy to know your yacht's going to make quite the splash." I stopped 3 feet from her, my voice calm but cold. "Sophia, I'm going to say this once. Get off my dock." Her fake smile faltered. "Excuse me, you heard me. You and everyone else here are trespassing. This is private property." She crossed her arms, chin raised. "No, it's community property. The HOA voted on it." "I don't care if you voted with the Pope," I said. "You don't own this marina. I do. And you're about 5 minutes away from getting a police escort off it." That got her attention. Around us, the chatter died. A few of the guests exchanged nervous looks. Sophia, though, doubled down because of course she did. "You wouldn't dare call the police on your neighbors," she said. "It'll only make you look bad. Try me." She smirked, gesturing to her friends. "Ladies, continue with setup." That was all I needed. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to my contact list, and hit the number I'd saved a month earlier, Lake County Sheriff's Office. Dispatch, a woman's voice answered. "What's your emergency?" "Yes," I said evenly. "This is Michael Johnson. I need officers dispatched to Lakewood Estates Marina. I have approximately 40 trespassers attempting to break into my private property." That got Sophia's attention. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. "You're insane. This is a civil matter. The police won't do anything." I stared straight at her. "We'll see." 20 minutes later, 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled through the gated entrance. The crowd scattered like startled pigeons. The music cut off. Sophia, however, stood her ground, arms folded, looking like she owned the world. The first deputy officer, Reyes, according to his badge, approached. "Morning, folks. Got a call about a trespassing issue." "Yes, officer," Sophia said, immediately flashing her HOA badge like it was the Secret Service. "There's no trespassing here. This is an HOA event. We're within our rights." Reyes turned to me. "You're the property owner." I nodded and handed him a thick folder. title deed purchase agreement, and county records. The marina dock and shoreline are all privately owned by me. Reyes flipped through the pages, his brow furrowing. The second deputy officer, Patel, walked to the dock gate, examining the cut padlock hanging loosely from the latch. Ma'am, Reyes said to Sophia, "These documents are legitimate. It looks like this marina isn't HOA property." Sophia's face froze. "That can't be right. The bylaws, he interrupted, don't override county land records. Right now you and your group are on private land without permission." A murmur spread through the crowd. Sophia's inner circle members shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, "Wait, he really owns it." Sophia's lips trembled slightly, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. "Officer, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. We can settle this among ourselves." Reyes shook his head. "No, ma'am. You've already caused property damage by cutting this lock. I'm going to have to ask you to clear the area." She laughed nervously. "You're not serious." "I am." When he said that, the reality seemed to finally hit her. Her face turned pale, and for the first time since I'd met her, Sophia Brown was speechless. Her inner circle members began packing up in silence. Balloons popped as someone yanked them off the railing. The smell of half-cooked burgers drifted from the abandoned grill. One by one, her guests shuffled away, muttering apologies. Sophia lingered until the end, standing there in her pink blazer eyes burning holes through me. "You'll regret this," she said quietly. "You've made an enemy of the HOA." I took a slow sip from the coffee I'd brought down with me. "I'll take my chances." She stormed off, heels clacking against the dock, until she disappeared up the hill. The deputies finished their reports and advised me to change my locks and keep copies of all documentation handy. "People like her don't quit easy," Reyes warned before driving off. He was right. The following week was pure hell. The HOA started sending me new violation notices every other day: failure to comply with community spirit clause, obstruction of shared access, unauthorized signage. They even fined me for unsightly dock accessories. Apparently my life jackets were offensive. I ignored them all. Then came the harassment. I started getting anonymous letters stuffed into my mailbox. "You don't belong here. Sell your house before it gets worse." The HOA always wins. I knew exactly who was behind it. Sophia wasn't just angry, she was obsessed. She'd turned her humiliation into a mission. A few neighbors started avoiding me entirely. Others whispered apologies when they thought no one was looking. One, a kind older woman named Patricia Evans, knocked on my door one evening. "I'm sorry, Michael," she said softly. "She's telling everyone you cheated the HOA, that you tricked them out of the marina." "Let her talk," I said. "The truth will catch up." Patricia hesitated. "She's calling an emergency meeting next week. She says it's to resolve the marina dispute." "Resolve?" I repeated, smirking. "That's one word for it." The following Wednesday, I walked into the HOA clubhouse for round 2. The room buzzed with tension. Sophia sat at the front, hair, perfectly coiffed, eyes gleaming with vengeance. "Let's come to order," she said, banging her gavel. "We're here to address one resident's ongoing non-compliance, Mr. Michael Johnson." Every head turned. Sophia continued, "Mr. Johnson refuses to recognize community ownership of the marina. This kind of selfishness undermines everything Lakewood Estates stands for." I stood up slowly. "Everything Lakewood stands for," I said, "or everything you stand for." Her face tightened. "You're out of order." "No," I said, "you are." I reached into my briefcase and laid out printed copies of the same ownership documents I'd shown the deputies. "Anyone who wants proof can read it themselves." Sophia snatched one, scanning it quickly. I could see the fury build behind her eyes. "Forgery," she said coldly. "This doesn't change anything." But the murmurs around the room told another story. People were starting to doubt her. The perfect facade of authority was cracking. She slammed the gavel again. "Enough. This meeting is adjourned." I left before anyone could stop me. That night, as I sat on my porch, watching the moonlight shimmer on the water, I realized something. I wasn't fighting an HOA anymore. I was fighting a queen who couldn't stand losing her throne. And like every self-crowned monarch before her, Sophia Brown wasn't done waging war. She was just getting started. By the next morning, I knew the line had been drawn in permanent ink. Sophia Brown wasn't just angry, she was determined to prove that no one could defy her HOA and survive unscathed. I spent most of that week documenting everything, every email, every notice, every photograph of inspectors lurking near my dock. My lawyer Daniel told me to keep my cool and collect evidence. "The more she overreaches," he said, "the better it'll look when this hits a courtroom." But deep down, I wasn't sure this would ever make it to court. Sophia didn't want legal victory, she wanted dominance. Then came Saturday. The lake was unusually quiet that morning. I was sitting in my office going through receipts when I heard a truck engine outside. I looked out the window and froze. 3 men were unloading folding chairs and boxes of decorations at the marina entrance. Behind them, Sophia's white Escalade pulled up, gleaming in the sunlight like a smug declaration of war. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and walked outside. "Sophia," I called out. She turned all smiles, pretending this was casual. "Michael, you're just in time. We're hosting a follow-up event for the community. Thought you might finally want to participate." I crossed my arms. "You're trespassing again." She gave a sharp laugh. "Please, don't make a scene. The HOA board has already approved this gathering." "On my land?" I asked. "On our marina," she corrected. "And according to the new HOA resolution, you're required to make your facilities available for community use." I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. "You mean the illegal resolution passed under false pretenses?" Her smile faltered. "Watch your tone." I pointed at the workers now uncoiling cables for speakers. "Tell them to pack it up, now." Sophia's voice rose. "Michael, if you keep obstructing community events, we'll escalate this further. You're already being fined daily. Escalate all you want," I said. "But this ends here." Then I did something I hadn't done before. I dialed the non-emergency police line and put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. "This is Michael Johnson," I said. "I'm the legal owner of the Lakewood Marina. There are unauthorized individuals attempting to set up an event on private property." Sophia's cheeks flushed crimson. "You really enjoy embarrassing yourself, don't you?" "No," I said, "but I'm starting to enjoy watching you lose." 15 minutes later, 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, same deputies as before. Officer Reyes stepped out first, clearly recognizing us both. "Morning again," he said dryly. Having déjà vu, Sophia immediately stepped forward. "Officer, this is harassment. We have full authorization from the HOA to use these facilities." "He's lying about ownership." Reyes sighed, already tired. "Ma'am, I saw the deeds last time. Unless something changed in county records, this is private property." Sophia crossed her arms. "Then I demand to see those records again. Right now." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "That's not how this works. If you think there's an error, take it up with a judge. But you can't throw a party on land that isn't yours." The crowd of curious neighbors that had gathered at the gate began whispering. Cameras clicked. Someone filmed on their phone. Sophia's lips trembled, then hardened. "Fine," she spat. "We'll leave for now, but this isn't over." Reyes looked at me. "We'll file another trespass report. Keep those documents safe." After they left, I stood on the dock alone, watching the water ripple around Serenity. It should have felt like victory, but I knew better. I'd humiliated Sophia publicly again. And that kind of person doesn't forget humiliation. They feed on it. That night I got my proof. At 1:13:7 p.m., the motion alert from my security cameras pinged on my phone. 3 figures moving near the dock. 1 tall, 1 medium build, 1 smaller, teenagers maybe. I switched to live view and zoomed in. They were prying open the yacht's engine hatch. I called 911 instantly. "This is Michael Johnson, Lakewood Estates Marina. I've got trespassers attempting to damage my property." By the time deputies arrived, the vandals had fled, but they left behind footprints, tools, and unfortunately for them, a dropped phone. The next morning, Deputy Reyes showed up at my door with a grim smile. "You're not going to believe this," he said, holding up the phone in an evidence bag. "Belongs to a kid named Ethan Brown. Any relation to your HOA president?" My stomach tightened. "Her son." "Thought so," he said. "We'll open a criminal investigation." I didn't even try to hide my satisfaction. Good. 2 days later, I was summoned to an urgent HOA disciplinary hearing. Of course I went. The clubhouse was packed again, the air thick with tension. Sophia sat at the front eyes, red-rimmed but defiant. As many of you have heard, she began certain false accusations are being spread about my family. I leaned back, arms folded. She continued, "Mr. Johnson has fabricated a story about my son to distract from his own misconduct. He's harassing our community, and enough," I said, standing. "Your son was caught on camera breaking into my yacht. The sheriff has his phone. Do you want to deny that on record?" The room fell silent. Sophia blinked, her composure cracking. You're lying." I opened my laptop, connected it to the clubhouse projector, and played the video. There it was, 3 teenagers creeping down the dock, flashlights sweeping across the hull, one of them prying the engine panel open. The frame froze on the last second, Ethan's face clearly visible. Gasps filled the room. Someone muttered, "That's her kid." Another whispered, "Unbelievable." Sophia looked like the floor had been ripped out from under her. She gripped the podium, knuckles white. This is being misinterpreted. I closed the laptop. It's called evidence. You've been lying, trespassing, defaming, and now your family's committing crimes. You think you run this community, but all you've done is destroy it. She tried to speak again, but no words came out. When the meeting adjourned, neighbors avoided her like she was contagious. Her inner circle didn't even look her way. That night, I sat on my porch watching the moon glint off Serenity's hull. My phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. Good work today. The police are pressing charges against her son. Time for phase 2. Let's talk tomorrow. Phase 2. I stared at the water, thinking about how a peaceful retirement dream had turned into a full-blown war zone. Sophia had pushed too far, and now she was about to learn what happened when you weaponized an HOA against the wrong man. But part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. I wasn't a fighter by nature. I liked calm order predictability. Yet here I was defending my right to breathe without HOA permission slips. The wind picked up across the lake, carrying the faint echoes of conversation from distant porches. Life went on, but I knew peace wouldn't last long, because Sophia Brown wasn't finished. She would regroup, rally her board, twist every word until she found another weapon to use against me. I poured another glass of whiskey, took a long sip, and whispered to the night, "Come at me, Sophia. I'm done playing nice." The reflection of the yacht shimmered in the dark water, strong and still. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't angry. I was ready. If I'd thought the yacht incident and the police report would finally end Sophia Brown's crusade, I was dead wrong. The woman didn't retreat, she regrouped. The following week, Lakewood Estates newsletter arrived in every mailbox with a headline printed in bold, "Community Under Threat, Board to Address Marina Misconduct." Below it, a long letter signed by Sophia herself. "Recent false ownership claims have disrupted the harmony of our neighborhood. The HOA will take appropriate steps to ensure no resident deceives or endangers the community." Her tone was calculated, just enough paranoia to stir fear, just enough vagueness to protect herself legally. That night my inbox exploded. Neighbors who once waved politely were now emailing me angry rants. "How could you lie about owning the marina? You're ruining Lakewood's reputation." Sophia says the developer confirmed she was supposed to have it all along. Daniel, my lawyer, skimmed the newsletter and sighed. "She's turning it into a political war. You can't reason with someone like this. You have to outmaneuver her." "I already have the truth," I said. He looked up from his notes. "The truth doesn't matter when she controls the microphone." He was right. Sophia wasn't just fighting for control of the marina, she was fighting for her narrative. The following Monday, she called another special HOA session. The agenda: disciplinary actions for member noncompliance and restoration of community order. I attended, of course. I wasn't going to let her spin the story uncontested. When I walked into the clubhouse, the atmosphere was different this time, less applause, more unease. Some residents avoided my gaze, but others gave subtle nods of support. Sophia stood at the podium in her signature pink blazer, every hair in place, every word rehearsed. "Neighbors," she began as your HOA president, "it's my duty to protect the integrity of Lakewood Estates. Recently, one resident's false claims and aggressive behavior have put our community at risk." She didn't say my name, but everyone knew. She continued, voice dripping with controlled anger. "After consulting our legal advisor, the board has voted to temporarily suspend this resident's access to all shared amenities, pool, gym, clubhouse, until further review." A murmur spread through the room. I stepped forward. "You can't suspend someone based on lies, Sophia. That's retaliation." She smiled sweetly. "Retaliation, no. Enforcement." She held up a new document. "Effective immediately, Mr. Michael Johnson's community access keycards are deactivated. Furthermore, the HOA has decided to restrict road access to the marina until we can verify rightful ownership." That last part hit harder than I expected. "You're blocking my access to my own property. It's a safety precaution," she said, her tone sugar-coated venom. "Until the board determines the marina's legal status, no one is allowed through without HOA approval." The crowd broke into whispers again, some shocked, others approving. Sophia turned toward me, lowering her voice into a mockingly sympathetic tone. "You're welcome to appeal, of course, but until then, rules are rules." For the first time in my life, I was speechless. She'd found a loophole. The marina access road technically did pass through a small strip of HOA-managed land. I'd never noticed it before, buried deep in the original property maps. By the next morning, the road was blocked by a brand new aluminum fence and a large self-satisfied sign, "Private OA, access only. Trespassers will be fined." When I tried to drive down to check the damage, 2 hired guards in black uniforms stepped in front of my truck. "Sorry, sir," one said. HOA orders. You can't pass without authorization. I laughed in disbelief. Authorization from who, Mrs. Brown? He replied flatly. I pulled out my phone and started filming. Congratulations, I said. You're both officially trespassing on private land. They didn't flinch. That night Daniel came over with a folder full of state statutes. You're in the right, he said. They're violating easement laws, the legal right to access your own property. This won't hold up in court for 5 seconds. But I knew what Sophia was doing. She wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to wear me down. For days, I had to park half a mile away and hike through the woods just to reach Serenity. Every time I passed that ridiculous HOA fence, I imagined Sophia watching from her window smiling. And she didn't stop there. I started noticing new violations piling up on my doorstep: grass too long, porch light too bright, mailbox flag unapproved color. The fines added up to nearly $5, 0 inches a month. Then one night, something far worse happened. It was nearly midnight when I decided to check on Serenity. I hiked down through the trees, flashlight in hand. The lake was calm silver in the moonlight. But when I reached the dock, I noticed the faint smell of gasoline. My stomach dropped. The yacht's engine compartment was open again. Tools were scattered on the deck. The lock had been pried apart. I turned on my flashlight beam and froze. There was movement near the bow, 3 figures in hoodies. Hey, I shouted, running forward. They bolted instantly, their footsteps thundering against the wooden dock. I chased them halfway to the tree line before one slipped, stumbled, then kept running. I didn't catch them, but I didn't need to. My security cameras had been rolling the whole time. When I checked the footage an hour later, I felt my blood boil. The faces were fuzzy, but not enough to hide their identities. Ethan Brown, Sophia's son. Again. This time with 2 other teenage boys. The next morning, I brought the footage straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Reyes took one look at it and whistled softly. Persistent kid, huh? Persistent mother, I corrected. He nodded. We'll open another file. This one's serious tampering with marine engines is felony-level vandalism if it endangers public safety. That phrase, felony-level vandalism, was music to my ears. Still, Sophia acted as though nothing had happened. The next time I saw her, she was strolling around the clubhouse gardens, laughing with a few of her remaining inner circle followers. When our eyes met, she didn't even look guilty. She just smirked, lifted her coffee cup, and mouthed, "Nice try." That's when I realized she wasn't just delusional, she was dangerous. 2 nights later, Daniel called with a new plan. We're not playing defense anymore, he said. We're going on the attack. He laid it out in detail: a civil lawsuit against the HOA for harassment, defamation, and violation of easement rights. We'd also add Sophia personally for abuse of power and property interference. We'll serve them all at once, he said. Make it public. Let her feel the same spotlight she's used to humiliate you. I leaned back in my chair, finally feeling something close to relief. Do it. Daniel smiled. And there's one more thing. I checked your marina's old lease agreement, the one Sophia thinks gives her authority. Guess what? It's a symbolic lease, $1 per year, renewable only if both parties follow community regulations. It has a violation clause. If the lessee, meaning the HOA, breaches conduct standards, you can terminate it instantly. I grinned. So if I pull that trigger, she loses everything. We filed the paperwork the next morning. I delivered the termination notice myself. I printed it on crisp white paper, folded it once, and dropped it in the HOA mailbox with a neat little note on top. Effective immediately, the Lakewood HOA's lease of the marina is terminated due to repeated violations of community conduct and interference with private property. Access to the marina is revoked. Michael Johnson. By sundown, word had spread through the entire neighborhood. 23 families who kept their boats at the marina suddenly realized their access was gone. The locks had been changed, and a new sign hung on the gate: private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. And just like that, the tide turned. Sophia's supporters started knocking on her door instead of mine. Angry, panicked, demanding answers. One resident shouted loud enough for me to hear from across the lake, "You said this wouldn't affect us. You said the marina was ours." Sophia tried to calm them, but the cracks in her empire were showing. The queen of Lakewood Estates was losing her court. As for me, I sat on my porch that evening watching the last light fade over the water and allowed myself the first genuine smile I'd had in months. The battle wasn't over, but the war had finally shifted in my favor. By sunrise the next day, the fallout from my move had detonated like a bomb across Lakewood Estates. The HOA's group chat, usually a dull scroll of landscaping complaints and bake sale updates, was in full-blown panic mode. Residents who'd once worshipped Sophia were now realizing they couldn't reach their boats. Why is the gate locked? I can't access my pontoon. Sophia, you said this wouldn't affect us. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't the villain. I was the one holding the keys, literally. By mid-morning, the phone calls started. HOA board members, neighbors, even a local real estate agent asking for a clarification on ownership status. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I met my lawyer, Daniel Pierce, at his office. He looked like a man who'd just smelled victory. You ready to finish this? He asked, sliding a folder across his desk. Inside were the documents for a full-scale civil lawsuit, Michael Johnson versus blank. Lakewood Estates Homeowners Association, allegations harassment, defamation, property interference, and violation of easement laws. Additional claim termination of the HOA's symbolic marina lease for misconduct. Daniel leaned back, tapping his pen. We're going to hit them where it hurts legally and financially. Sophia won't see this coming. I smiled. Good. I'm done playing defense. He nodded. One more thing, you'll want to be at the HOA meeting tonight. They're trying to hold an emergency vote to reverse your termination notice. That's when we serve them. That night, I walked into the clubhouse with Daniel at my side, briefcase in hand. The place was boiling with tension. Every seat was filled, every voice sharp. Sophia sat at the front, pale but defiant. Her hair wasn't as perfect this time. Her smile was brittle. She looked like a general who'd lost half her army but refused to surrender. When I entered, conversations died. Sophia slammed her gavel. Let's begin. Due to recent confusion regarding the marina, we'll hold a vote to reinstate HOA management rights and nullify Mr. Johnson's so-called ownership. I took a step forward. Before you vote, I think everyone here deserves the truth. Her eyes narrowed. You are not recognized to speak. Daniel smiled. Actually, he is. Under Section 8 of your own HOA bylaws, any resident subject to a vote affecting property rights has the right to present evidence. Murmurs rippled through the room. Sophia hesitated, realizing she'd boxed herself in. Fine, she said through clenched teeth. 5 minutes. I placed the briefcase on the table and opened it slowly, letting the moment breathe. Then I began. 2 years ago, I legally purchased the entire Lakewood Marina from the original developer. The HOA was leasing it for $1 a year, but never assumed ownership. You can verify that with county records. Daniel handed out printed copies of the deed to every board member. This, I continued, holding up the lease, is the contract you've been operating under. Section 6 clearly states, the lessor retains full right to revoke the lease upon breach of conduct or misuse of facilities. That means if the HOA harasses or damages private property, I can end it immediately. Sophia's face drained of color. That's not legally binding. Daniel cut in. It's notarized, filed, and signed by the developer's attorney. It's binding. I turned back to the crowd. You've all been misled. The fines, the restrictions, the lies, none of it was about community spirit. It was about control. Sophia wanted to punish me for not obeying her. Gasps filled the room. Sophia tried to regain control. You can't prove harassment, I smiled thinly. Actually, I can. I opened my laptop and played the security footage of Ethan Brown and his 2 friends breaking into Serenity. The images flashed across the clubhouse screen in silence. The gasps this time were louder. Someone in the back whispered, "That's her son." When the video ended, I let the silence sit for a few seconds before saying, "Your son vandalized my yacht twice, and instead of apologizing, you printed flyers calling me a liar." Sophia rose from her seat, trembling with rage. "You're twisting everything. That footage could have been faked. You've set us all up," Daniel stood. "Ma'am, the sheriff's department authenticated the footage. Your son's facing criminal charges." Her knees buckled slightly, and for a moment I thought she might faint. The crowd erupted into chaos, people shouting questions, board members huddling, others filming the whole thing on their phones. One resident yelled, "You lied to us, Sophia," another. "My boat's locked because of you." She tried to shout over them. "This is slander. I've done everything for this community," but the crowd wasn't listening anymore. A man I recognized, Harold White, one of the board's senior members, stood up and addressed everyone. "I move for a vote of no confidence in the current HOA president." Gasps again. Sophia froze. "You can't," he raised a hand. "Yes, we can. Majority vote. Let's do this properly." Within minutes, slips of paper were being passed around. It was messy, heated, and strangely satisfying. When the votes were tallied, the final count was devastating, 89% in favor of immediate removal. Sophia didn't move. She stared blankly at the numbers, lips trembling. Effective immediately, Harold said Sophia Brown is removed from her position as president of Lakewood Estates HOA. Applause broke out, not polite but cathartic. People cheered, whistled, even clapped me on the shoulder as they passed. Sophia stood slowly, gathering her notes with shaking hands. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You'll regret this." I looked her dead in the eye. "I already did. Now it's your turn." She stormed out of the clubhouse, her heels clicking across the tiles like fading thunder. Daniel leaned over and murmured, "Well, that went better than expected." For once, I agreed. The board called an emergency recess, and within an hour, the HOA attorney confirmed the obvious: the marina lease was terminated legally, and the HOA had no authority there. They promised to review compliance procedures and apologize for any misunderstandings. In lawyer speak, that meant they were scrambling to save face. That evening, I walked back to the marina. The water was still. Serenity floated quietly under a sky streaked with orange. For months, that sight had been tainted by stress, anger, and intrusion. But that night it felt pure again, mine, entirely mine. As I stood there, Patricia Evans, the kind elderly neighbor who'd warned me months ago, appeared beside me. "I heard what happened," she said softly. "She's gone, voted out," I replied. "For good." Patricia nodded slowly. "Took long enough. She ran this place like a dictatorship." "Dictators fall eventually," I said. She smiled. "So, what happens now?" I looked out at the lake, feeling the weight finally lift from my shoulders. Now peace. But even as I said it, I knew the war wasn't truly over until the legal dust settled. Daniel still had to finalize the lawsuit, and Sophia, knowing her pride, would probably drag it through every appeal she could find. Still, for the first time, I didn't care. She'd lost the one thing she valued most: power. As I poured myself a drink aboard Serenity, I thought back to everything that had happened: the fines, the lies, the break-ins, the way she'd weaponized bureaucracy like a sword. And I realized something important. I hadn't just been fighting Sophia Brown. I'd been fighting a mindset, the idea that authority always trumps truth, that paperwork beats principle. But not this time. The last of the sunlight faded, turning the lake to liquid gold. I raised my glass to the quiet, to the victory, to the long-awaited stillness that finally felt earned. "Here's to boundaries," I said softly. "May they always be respected." Sophia Brown didn't go quietly. For a week after her removal, she stalked through Lakewood Estates like a ghost that didn't know it was dead. I'd see her Escalade glide past my house at slow speed, her tinted window rolling down just long enough for me to feel the weight of her glare. She wasn't HOA president anymore, but she still acted like she ruled the lake. Her fall from power became the neighborhood's favorite show. Neighbors who once feared her now gossiped openly at the mailbox or on morning walks. "Did you hear the sheriff's pressing charges on her son? I heard she's selling the house. She owes Michael a fortune in damages." By the end of that month, Sophia's empire had crumbled. The HOA board held an emergency election and voted in Harold White as interim president, a soft-spoken retiree who believed rules were for guidance, not for tyranny. The difference was immediate. The flood of violation notices stopped overnight. No more surveillance, no more threats, no more HOA inspectors creeping around like spies. And then came the best part: justice. Daniel called me one Friday morning, voice practically humming through the phone. "You're going to like this," he said. "The county prosecutor's office just confirmed felony vandalism charges for Ethan Brown and his 2 friends. They're going to court next month." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Guess he's learning early about consequences." And his mother Daniel continued, is being investigated for conspiracy and obstruction. She's the one who paid for the locksmith that broke into your yacht. We found the transaction in her HOA expense logs. That made me pause. She used HOA funds. Yep, technically she committed embezzlement. The new board's doing a full audit, and it looks bad for her. "Bad," I repeated, grinning. "I like bad." By the time the audit wrapped up 2 weeks later, the results were explosive. Sophia had siphoned nearly $60, 0 inches maintenance fees, to fund personal expenses, flowers for her house, a new patio deck, and even a community appreciation trip that turned out to be a weekend spa getaway with her inner circle. The HOA announced the findings in a public letter complete with signatures from the new board. Within days, Sophia's husband, Richard Brown, filed for divorce and quietly moved out of Lakewood. The once feared queen of Lakewood Estates was officially dethroned, disgraced, and alone. Daniel and I met with the new board soon after. They were nervous, polite, desperate to make peace. Harold did most of the talking. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "we'd like to apologize for everything. We've inherited a mess. We'd appreciate a chance to settle this civilly." Daniel folded his hands. My client has been harassed, defamed, and financially harmed. Any settlement must reflect that. Harold nodded quickly. Of course. What do you propose? I leaned forward. Simple, I said. $50,000 for damages and legal costs, a public apology in the community newsletter, and a new marina agreement that recognizes my ownership permanently. No more confusion, no more power games. There was a long silence. Harold looked around the table, then sighed in relief. Done. I think we can all agree it's time for Lakewood Estates to move on. The settlement was signed that same week. I received my check, and the next month's newsletter opened with a rare sight: the HOA admitting fault. We, the Board of Lakewood Estates, formally apologized to resident Michael Johnson for the undue stress, false claims, and violations of privacy committed by former leadership. We look forward to rebuilding a respectful and transparent community. That issue sold out fast. But I wasn't done. Under the new agreement, I offered 20 families access to marina slips again at a fair monthly rate of $200. The money would go toward maintenance, security, and insurance. Fair use for fair neighbors. When the gates reopened, people cheered. Several residents even stopped by my dock to shake my hand. Didn't realize how bad she was until now, one man said. Another offered me a 6-pack of beer as tribute to the guy who survived Sophia Brown. Not everyone was thrilled, of course. Sophia's old allies couldn't handle the humiliation. They stopped attending meetings, refused to look me in the eye, and whispered like teenagers whenever I passed. But their power was gone. Sophia herself lasted exactly 3 more months in Lakewood. She kept her blinds closed, avoided everyone, and eventually listed her house quietly through a realtor who specialized in discreet transactions. When the moving trucks arrived, one cloudy morning, a small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. No one said a word, but the air felt lighter as her Escalade disappeared for the last time. That evening, Harold called me. She's gone, he said simply. Good, I replied. Now maybe this place can breathe again. He chuckled. You know, Michael, the new board's been talking. You'd make an excellent HOA treasurer. Maybe even president. I nearly spat out my drink. Thanks, but no thanks. I've had enough drama for a lifetime. He laughed. Fair enough. After that, life at Lakewood Estates finally returned to something resembling normal. The lake was calm again. No more fines, no more politics, no more HOA madness, at least for now. One late afternoon, as the sun sank low behind the hills, I walked down to Serenity. The deck glowed in gold light, the water glittering like molten glass. I poured myself a whiskey and leaned against the railing, breathing in the scent of pine and lake air. For the first time in years, it was quiet. The kind of quiet you can feel in your bones. I thought about everything that had happened. The absurdity, the rage, the sleepless nights. I'd spent my whole career managing crises with spreadsheets and logic. But this war had been different. It wasn't fought with numbers. It was fought with patience, proof, and principle. Sophia Brown had tried to own me through intimidation, through bureaucracy, through the fear of embarrassment. But bullies only win when you let them dictate your peace. The marina lights flickered on, reflecting off the calm water. I raised my glass and whispered, to boundaries and to holding the line. Behind me, I heard soft footsteps. It was Patricia Evans carrying a small plate of homemade cookies. Thought you might want something sweet with that victory, she said warmly. I smiled. You didn't have to. Oh, I did, she said, handing me the plate. You earned it. You gave this place its backbone again. We stood in silence, watching the lake shimmer. A few boats bobbed gently in the slips, laughter drifting from one of the newly reopened decks. Funny thing I said after a while. They asked me to join the HOA board. Patricia laughed. Oh Lord, tell me you said no. I did, I said. Told them I've had enough HOA drama to last a lifetime. She smiled knowingly. Smart man. As the last of the sunlight faded, I looked out across the water, feeling something I hadn't felt since the day I first bought Serenity Peace. The kind that doesn't come from winning or losing, but from knowing you stood your ground and never surrendered what was rightfully yours. I finished my drink, watching the reflection of the stars ripple across the lake. Sometimes I said softly to myself, the only way to deal with bullies is to remind them who owns the dock. The night air was cool, steady, and clean. For the first time in a long while, Lakewood Estates finally felt like home.